Welcome back to Earth Science, everyone. I'm Mr. Ackerman. Yesterday, we talked about the sun and the moon and the effect that they have on Earth and the tides. Today, we're going to talk more about the moon. Now, for the longest time, people didn't know much about the moon itself until very recently when we had space missions that went into space and took a look at the moon itself. The first thing you want to know about the moon is that it gets its light by reflecting the sun, and we see that light down here on Earth. What scientists have discovered is that the moon's surface is not smooth. In fact, there are high and low areas. The low areas are going to appear dark when we see it from Earth, as opposed to the highlands, the mountains on the moon, are going to appear brighter since they reflect more sunlight. Now, rock or ice traveling in space is called a meteoroid, and when it strikes the surface of the moon, it creates these giant circular hollow impacts called lunar craters. Craters can be thousands of meters deep. Since the moon, unlike Earth, doesn't have an atmosphere, our atmosphere protects us from things in space coming and hitting us, except the really big ones. The moon doesn't have that, so any little thing floating in space that impacts the moon will cause a crater. Now, the moon travels in space in predictable cycles, and this motion explains why the moon will appear in different shapes in our sky. Let's talk about motion for a second. We said that the moon reflects the sun's light, and half the moon is always going to be lit up from the sun. Now, here on Earth, we're only going to see that half of the moon. We're never going to see the dark side of the moon. This is because the moon is both rotating, spinning on its axis, as well as revolving, going around the Earth. The moon will make one rotation, or spin once completely, in the same time that it's going to make one revolution, go around the world completely. So therefore, we're always going to see the same side since it's constantly turning. The moon's path around the Earth is called an orbit, and the orbit is not going to be a perfect circle, it's going to be elliptical, and we'll talk about ellipses tomorrow. When the moon is nearest to Earth, it's called perigee, and when it's farthest, it's called apogee. Yesterday we discussed how this is going to affect the tides. Because the Earth is turning as well, we're going to see the moon rise in the east and set in the west. The moon's going to rise at different times each day or night, because every time the Earth spins once, the moon is going to move farther along in its orbit, so the moon is going to rise 50 minutes later every day. The sun is going to light up half the moon, and that is the half of the moon that is visible to us from Earth. However, when you look up at the sky, you will see that the shape is changing, and this is because the amount of the lit up moon that we see is going to be different every day. This is called phases of the moon, which is the daily changes in the shape of the moon from our view on Earth. Joining us now to talk more about the phases of the moon is the moon. Welcome, thank you for being here. So let's start off. How long does it take for you to complete a full phase, to go from start to finish?
Yeah, it takes me about a month, and during that time, the moon is gonna wax on and wax off.
Wax on, wax off.
Okay, so let's talk more about that. You're describing the process of going from a new moon where we can't see any of the moon being lit up to a full moon where the whole thing is lit up in the sky and then back again.
Yeah, so the new moon is when the lit part of the moon is not facing Earth, so you can't see nothing. The full moon is when the lit part of the moon is facing Earth, so the moon is fully lit. So as I'm getting lit, it's called waxing, and as it's getting darker, it's called waning.
Okay, got it. So what about the phases in between? Going from a new moon to a full moon, as well as from full to new.
Yeah, so what it really depends on is where you're looking at it from. So right now I got lights in my face, so if you was behind me, it would be completely dark. And as you slowly come around, more and more light is going to show. So the first little bit is called a crescent, where you only see a little edge. Then when about half the moon is lit up, it's called a quarter. And then when it's almost all the way bright, it's called a gibbous. And then we have the full moon, where you're looking at it from the front, where I'm fully lit.
So when we're looking at the moon in the night sky and we only see a part of it, how do we know if it's waxing or if it's waning?
Alright, so when you look at the moon If the lit up shape is on the right, then it's waxing, and if it's on the left, then it's waning.
Got it. Moon, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us and sharing all that with us. Now you might be asking yourself, when the moon is between us and the sun, why doesn't it always block the sun from us? Or, when the Earth is between the sun and the moon, why don't we block the sunlight from the moon? The answer to this is the Earth and the moon are on different planes of orbit, which means that the moon is always going to be a little bit higher or a little bit lower than the Earth, so it's still going to get sunlight and be visible from here on Earth. However, sometimes, when all of it lines up, you get what's called an eclipse. A lunar eclipse is when you have a full moon, and the Earth is going to be between the moon and the sun. The Earth's shadow is going to prevent sunlight from reaching the moon, and whatever part of the moon passes through Earth's shadow will be visible as a dark red color, since the sunlight needs to bend around the Earth's atmosphere, creating a different color. A solar eclipse is when a moon comes directly between the sun and the Earth. It's going to cast a shadow on Earth, blocking out the sun. If you remember a few years ago, we had almost a complete solar eclipse here in New York in the summer, where everybody had to buy those specialized glasses. That's all you need to know for today. Please make sure to answer the questions in the form below and hit that submit button. If you have any questions about what we learned today, send me a message in Google Classroom or join me on Zoom and I'll be sure to answer them. Thank you to the moon for joining us, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.